Hello there, and welcome to another edition of the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Robin Washett, Stephen M. Sipple. Robin is somewhere driving south down to Oklahoma City, getting ready for his annual NBA trip, which it doesn't get any more Steve Sipple than an annual NBA trip.
Yeah, so he's takes NBA trips because his grandkids are like diehard NBA fans. And so his way of connecting with the youths in his family is through the NBA. And so they go on this annual trip. Last year, I think they went to Memphis, and I'm sure they've gone to a few other places. So that they're in Oklahoma City. Who are they playing?
It's Cleveland. It's Cleveland. Like the game of the week. So Sip is going to be down watching NBA. If you're walking around downtown OKC in the Bricktown area, you might see Sip. You might run into Sip roaming around the streets, but lots to get to. And Robin will be with me as well on Friday for headlines as we do our second headline show of the week. But it's the final portal push for Nebraska. Currently, Huskers are at 16 portal additions. They're waiting on a final word from Shaez Pete. What you hear right now doesn't feel great for Nebraska. That's the tackle prospect out of New Mexico State, but he's been a very hard prospect to read. Michigan's in this picture with Shaez Pete. Vanderbilt is in the picture, and then Kentucky and even Stanford. But I think Michigan and Kentucky are the other two major players. Nebraska did lose another name, Jonah Wilson, and he was from Houston, and it was complicated because he was essentially in the boat. My understanding was he was a soft, silent commit behind the scenes, but they could not sign him because of the 85 limits. And you have to get creative and bring guys in as walk-ons, but still pay him NIL. And he was set to have a full deal, but in a different route. Well, Texas A&M has swooped in to get Jonah Wilson, and he is going to go to A&M now as a signed member. And that is one complicated thing, Robin. The 85 is still a factor. So you really want these guys to sign, because if they would have been able to sign him, then you're unrecruitable at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's a new element to this whole thing is, you got to probably watch the numbers more than you ever have before, not just with the 85, but then also with the
105.
Sorry, the 105. That has to go along with that, with not only guys you're bringing in, but then who are you going to cut? You're already having a hard time whittling down your roster. And the more we're talking about potentially, like you wrote on Monday, adding the largest transfer class Nebraska's ever had, that's the numbers are going to get a little dicey there. And so, yes, signatures make a big difference, because you don't want to just go on somebody's word and then make all these alterations and plans around the rest of your roster and then have that player fall through. And then all of a sudden you're left scrambling in two ways.
Well, they're at 16 right now, and that is tied for the most in history. Jonah Wilson would have brought him over to 17. Shaez Pete's obviously in play. 16 is the most they took, and that was back in 2022 when Scott Frost was in his final year. Matt Rule has obviously never taken a number this large. And I don't think he anticipated doing that, but it just tells you where things are at. You've overhauled this staff with a new offensive coordinator, now a new defensive coordinator, and a new special teams coordinator. So there's been a lot of overhaul, and I think that's led to maybe some of this too, where they've retooled some different position groups with some of these staff changes that have come with it.
Yeah. Do you think this is more a byproduct of just the fact that they're replacing, I guess in theory, 3 coordinators? I mean, Holgerson's obviously back, but like the amount of attrition that's come with that, like losing Tony White and then obviously Terrence Knighton with that, and the ripple effect that had, has that led to a larger portal class, or is it more of a reflection of just kind of the importance they're placing on this offseason and the need to upgrade that talent across the board? And maybe they're kind of looking at what the roster they had coming back and says, you know what, we need to get better. It was just that with how critical this year 3 of our area is going to be, like we just need to upgrade our talent across the board. Do you think it's more of a coaching reaction to it, or is it a matter of they're looking at the roster and saying we need to get better at every spot?
Well, they were so old last year in a lot of key areas, and you can't just replace 6-year players, 5th-year players with 1-year program players. So I think that's where things are at right now. They had so much youth in that true freshman and even redshirt freshman group that a lot of those guys, when you're just being honest, making that jump to Big Ten level starters a big jump. And that's where this next crop of portal players will supplement to an extent, I think, before that next wave of young players, a group of those guys can emerge. Because look, Nash Huntmacher and Ty Robinson, after their first and second years, they weren't at this level.
Nope.
It takes a while, and that's where you get a Deshaun McCullough. That's where you get a Marquise Watson-Trent, and some of these veteran players that they've been able to bring in on defense. Elijah Pritchard on the O-line as a tackle. They had to get a tackle, and they like to get 2 tackles. So there's a lot there in this final portal push. Nebraska will be able to have visitors again from the portal this weekend before classes start on the 21st. Now, as of right now, show taping on Wednesday morning, we don't have any confirmed visitors. So that will be something to stay on Husker Online, as if they get any visitors in, we'll obviously have that information for our users on Husker Online. But Robin, secondly, I wanted to get to the title game and our opening headlines. It is Monday night. One thing that's caught my attention are the TV ratings for the semifinal games were startlingly low for what is supposed to be this new exciting playoff. And I think there's a lot of theories out there. Number one, the games are only on ESPN. They're not on ABC. So naturally you lower some ratings when you take them off the 3-letter networks, but also the nights of the week. I think the semifinals falling on a Thursday and a Friday versus a traditional Saturday. That also had an effect. But man, it just tells you the grip the NFL has on all of this still, that college football does not want any of those games going against even a single NFL game.
Yeah. And just think about, I mean, as from a football fan perspective, like that weekend of games was incredible. Basically Thursday through Monday with elimination playoff football. Like that was as awesome as it gets. But there's a point where it almost becomes saturated. And, you know, the standalone weekends that college football like maybe would have liked to have had just kind of overshadowed by the NFL, where you're talking about 3 days of playoff football where, you know, it's Saturday, it's Sunday, and then Monday night. And then you got football or college football kind of getting lost in the shuffle a little bit of that. And then again, Friday night games are just hard, you know, especially this, you know, the time of year. And then, you know, I wonder how much the fact that there weren't any SEC teams affected that. I mean, that's a huge television market, and maybe, you know, there's some bitter SEC fans that are tuning out. They don't want to watch, you know, Penn State, Notre Dame, or, you know, the northern teams have their kind of run at the title here. So I think that's, you know, it's a culmination of things. But I think almost the biggest thing for me is just that there's just so much going on that weekend that, unfortunately, the college football playoffs got lost in the shuffle a little bit.
Well, to put it in perspective, even in the first round of the playoffs, it was regular season NFL. Texans Chiefs on NBC, that drew 15.5 million. SMU Penn State head to head on cable on TNT, which is obviously not a channel you go to for football ever, other than these playoff games, right, was 6.4 million. So the Chiefs Texans, you know, a big regular season game at that point, drew 9 million more viewers than a playoff game did. And then later in the day, Clemson, Texas drew 8.6 million, where the Steelers Ravens on Fox drew 15.4. So the NFL's grip on the ratings is real. And I think it affected college football with having to play these games on Thursday, Friday. Now they'll get their traditional Monday night spot. Notre Dame, Ohio State's going to pull a big number. I think the question is, how big is it going to compare to what we've seen in some past playoffs?
And again, I'm curious about just what the North, South, SEC, Big Ten component is going to do to the ratings. You know, I just wonder how many, like, again, the fine bombs of the world are just going to be so, you know, upset that one of their schools isn't in the title game that they might just not tune out. I don't know if it's going to be that.
Well, Notre Dame and Ohio State are two.
Yeah, they're national brands.
I mean, they're only Georgia and Alabama, along with Michigan, would rank in the same level of weight class. So you've got 2 of the 5 heavyweights in terms of TV ratings playing each other. I mean, it's that alone. I mean, you got NBC's heavyweight Notre Dame, and then the Big Ten's ratings heavyweight Ohio State. So they're going to get a big number. But yeah, I think that cultural war of the South versus the Big Ten draws better. I mean, you know, go back to last year's Rose Bowl. when it was Michigan versus Alabama. I mean, that was huge.
Well, and I just look at it like from like a northern perspective, like how disinterested were a lot of fans when it was Alabama LSU again, or Alabama Georgia again. Like it was just kind of like, oh, I don't really care about this game. Like I'll watch it because it's the championship, but like there wasn't that level of intrigue. So, I think it's a it's a geographical shift here to where the northern schools are now at the forefront, and I wonder what that's going to do to SEC territory viewership.
Now, this I still believe though they'll get a good rating.
I do
this
too.
One.
I do too.
I mean, we're not talking about like a Rangers Diamondbacks World Series.
No, not at all.
Like this is closer to a Yankees Dodgers World Series type deal. I mean, it's going to get a big number. No football to compete against it. So. When we come back, though, Rob and I are going to transition. I want to talk transfer portal and what's being proposed to try to fix that. We'll hit on that next. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Robin Washett, as Steve Sipple not with us here this week, away on some downtime. But before we get into some transfer portal discussion here, this segment of the Husker Online Show brought to you by Prizepicks. There is no better way to get into the action, whether it's your favorite playoff game, your favorite college basketball game, college football, NBA, you name it. Prizepicks lets you get in the action. It's daily fantasy sports. All you simply pick is more or less of your favorite stat categories. It could be Patrick Mahomes rushing yards, more than 30, less than 30. It could be the number of rebounds Juwan Gary is going to have in a basketball game, more or less, and you can mix and match those. You can win up to 10 times your money. There's tons of different ways to play and get into the action on Prizepicks. All you have to do is simply pick more or less, and guess what? Husker Online, we are going to match your first deposit. Simply put in $5, and we are going to match it and give you a $50 deposit match with your first $5. Use the promo code Husker Online. That's promo code Husker Online. You'll get $50 matched when you put $5 in on your first Prizepicks deposit. Thank you to Prizepicks for sponsoring us here on the Husker Online Show. But Robin, I wanted to hit on this with the transfer portal because we all know it's broken. We all know the tampering and this model needs to be fixed. It's almost been corrected and fixed every year. We've tried to do something different. Well, now the latest flavor is coming up with this 10-day window from January 2nd to January 12th to allow players to enter. And then that's it. There wouldn't be a spring window. There wouldn't be a December window. No portal entries until after bowl games. And the thought is this would maybe eliminate tampering. This would allow teams to focus on their bowl games and recruiting and other things. My question is, like any good law, will the smart sharks find ways around it?
Oh, always. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of the beast. But if at least this way, it does eliminate some of the aspect of having to try to re-recruit your roster while you're also trying to prepare to play games, or including bowl games, including college football playoff games. Like that to me makes this proposal a no-brainer, and I would be stunned if it isn't passed, and would be the first of maybe other steps to come to try to corral the current situation. I don't think there's anything that's ever going to like truly quote unquote fix college football's portal situation, but at least this can allow coaches an opportunity to breathe a little bit, especially towards the most stressful part of the season at the end of the year. And also players too, like, you maybe slows down the need to jump in as early as they do, and allow them to maybe play things out a little bit more with their current teams. And that might alter some decisions down the road where maybe their situations change. So I think the more that we can just kind of curtail the Wild West aspect of what portal has become, the better for the game.
Yeah, I think the one that really got my attention recently was Emmanuel Pregnon, offensive lineman from USC. He agreed to stay at USC, signed a new NIL agreement, actually played in the bowl game against Texas A&M, then goes into the portal out of nowhere after all this, And now he's at Oregon. And it doesn't really take a rocket scientist to figure out what happened here. Oregon's got a lot of money. They're backed by Nike and Phil Knight. And when programs like Oregon need a player, they have the ability to penetrate and get that done. And Pregnon is now an Oregon Duck when USC thought they had him. And I think there's a lot of that going on. I'm sure Alabama would say Elijah Pritchett was probably tampered with. At least numbers were given to him that, hey, if you left Alabama, you'd get this. And I think the longer you keep that window open to allow people to jump in, it just, the money gets involved and it forces a lot of things to happen. Yeah.
And again, I don't think that this particular proposal is going to just immediately solve those problems. I think tampering will always be there. It always has been there, but at least now you're controlling the calendar a little bit more to just shorten the windows for things like that to happen. And if teams are going to make those types of moves, they better have a plan and they better do it quickly, because you don't have months to sway a guy out of his current situation. And so I think that's probably just, if anything else, it makes it a shorter window for that type of stuff to go on. I don't think it's going to eliminate it by any means, but just limiting the opportunity to do that is at least a positive in itself.
Yeah, because here's the reality of college football right now. If you're at one of 15 or 20 certain programs, in Nebraska, I'd put in that camp, you can go in and look at anyone's roster of the other 100 teams out there, and you almost have the ability to buy their player. I mean, like that's what's going on. The money that differentiates the top 20-ish NIL and well-heeled programs to the rest is that significant, where those teams can't compete. Like they are not going to be able to keep those players. And that is what people want to try to slow down. But I don't know what that will do. But it will cause teams to have to make decisions quicker, because I do think when you start to look at your roster and like, gosh, we still need this position, it allows you to go in and just look at other teams' rosters and put feelers out to people through second and third, hand different people that can do that before they enter the portal.
Yeah. And so it's, not just a matter of like stopping the Oregons and the haves of college football from poaching rosters. It also takes some of the stress away from the have-not coaches to have to constantly try to keep their roster intact while they're still trying to coach for their jobs and build a program. Like I think it works both ways, to where like it makes it harder for schools to kind of flex their money in certain respects, but then it also makes it easier for other coaches to have better roster retention and then try to maybe convince players when, to not maybe get caught up just by the price tag offer that's getting thrown out there. They'll actually have an opportunity to, maybe sell other parts of why they should stay with their current program.
What is the basketball window right now? Is it how many days?
Oh, it's April. Yeah.
15 days.
Yes, 15, I think.
So around that number. But
they keep changing it all the time.
In a lot of respects, Nebraska is able, like Andrew Morgan, a North Dakota guy.
Yep.
They can just go to teams like that and say, yeah, we want him. And they get those players. So I think it's obviously happening in all levels. And Nebraska more or less had to buy a roster this year with a lot of players to go around Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary.
Yeah. 30-day window.
30-day. Okay. Yeah. And I wonder if that's going to be revisited.
Yeah, I'm sure it will, because I know at last NCAA tournament, that was kind of the talking point, was a very similar situation where teams are getting ready to enter the NCAA tournament and they're having to re-recruit their current players because there was tampering and poaching going on. So this is not just a football issue. This is a college basketball, and I'm sure even on to other sports with, women's sports and volleyball, and that with the way that the games are evolving and, money's being made beyond just the primary two sports. This is something that I think across all college athletics needs to happen.
It's killed the mid-major too.
Absolutely. But, I guess the hope is, for them, is that with these new roster restrictions, like there just won't be as many spots. Like you can't buy everybody, and you can't have 150 guys all on NIL deals. And so that hopefully will create roster spots or create better retention and opportunities to get some trickle down players for those mid-major and FCS level schools.
All right. When we come back, we are going to continue the discussion. Another new rule change that could be coming into college football. Also, I want to hit on some NFL teams possibly looking at college football coaches. Do you think anybody from the college ranks will make the move up? That's all next. You're listening to the Husker Online Show. We're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Robin Washad, as we continue to make our way here through mid-January. Players and coaches all report back here to Lincoln for classes next week. So we're in a little bit of a lull, but it's allowed for the rules convention and the AFCA coaches convention to go down this week in Charlotte. And one of the new rules being proposed, and I know they've tried to do a lot with this, Robin, in the past, is injuries. And what we've seen over the years, and Nebraska's been on the opposing side of this, where a player will fall down when Nebraska's offense had some good offensive momentum going in a no huddle and stop the game. The one that I always remember is Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
When Scott Frost's offense really got going against Tom Allen, and they lost that game. And Indiana would always have players fall down. We saw Michigan do it as well to Nebraska, where the players kind of fell down to slow down the pace of the game. Don't have to worry about it now when we watch Nebraska, because they're not really a no-huddle team like they were before. But the penalty could be, if you go down with an injury, you would be out for the entire drive. And I think that would go a long way. And to me, it's a no-brainer. And then there would also be a head coach fine, is what this report by Ross Dellinger showed here. But yeah, you're obviously, your quarterback is the big one. You know, there'd have to be some wiggle room with that, because obviously, you know, your quarterback is not somebody you want to be able to remove for the rest of the drive in that situation. But I do think the other positions should be fair game, and there almost should be some discrepancy used when they do this. I'll be interested if this passes.
Yeah. So with the fines, they say that coaches of teams perceived to have faked an injury would receive a $50,000 fine for the first offense, $100,000 for the second offense, and a suspension for the third game, for a third offense, a game suspension for a third offense. So, I mean, it's pretty substantial consequences there. And again, I think that's such a lame strategical tactic. Like, I get wanting to slow teams down, but like, you see just how like blatant some of these fake injuries are, where, you know, the guys are just be standing in the huddle and they show a replay. The guy's like looking at the sideline, then all of a sudden, he goes down and then has to, walk off. And not just it. For one, it's an unfair competitive advantage. Two, it slows down the pace of the game, and it's bad from a fan perspective. So I think there has to be some way to keep that in check. Now, with injuries, you never want to say, like, just accuse someone of faking it. That's why I think this is a good solution. Is like, all right, you're hurt, go sit out the rest of the drive. Like, now we're erring on the side of safety. You know, if you want to pretend to be hurt, well, you're going to pretend to be hurt for the rest of the drive. So that makes you probably be a little more selective if you're going to go that route. A lot of times you see players that do that, they're one of the smarter, more veteran players, like the coach's kid, or your star defensive back, or someone that is kind of in tune with what's going on the sideline. Are you going to have that player sit out for a drive? Probably not. So you have to be a little smarter in how you handle that. So it just makes doing that more difficult. And if you're deemed to be abusing that rule, there's actually some financial and even game consequences that come with it.
I still think, though, you can get around it by strategically designating a player or two as your injury guy, where you're not going to be hurt.
Sure.
Like, if you have a 6th or 7th O lineman that you can just sub in and not have a drop off, well, guess what? One of those O linemen is going to go down. If you have a stable of wide receivers, you're going to almost designate which receiver would be the guy to go down. I mean, I do think, but if they find you, that's like you said, and I have a hard time thinking they're going to be able to find you on that. It just seems like that seems extreme.
Yeah. Seems like more of a threat than anything they can do.
I just don't know how you could enforce taking a guy's money and trying to prove, like ankles and soft tissues are hard to prove. They don't show up on x-rays necessarily. So I don't know, where some of that will go, but I like the language of it, because I have seen it really affect Nebraska, particularly over the years. But the other thing I want to hit on, Robin, it's coaching season in terms of job markets, and there has not been a lot of big movement in college football yet. And, we're waiting on the NFL, and, you're hearing some names like Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. You're hearing, obviously, some other big names. Matt Campbell has been mentioned. Deion Sanders. I don't know. Like, does anybody want the Bears job? Would any of those guys really want to go work for Kevin Warren and that Bears organization? It doesn't seem like, they're a very attractive job to any of these guys.
Seems to be they got their heart set on Mike McCarthy, who was graciously let go from the Dallas Cowboys. That seems like it's got McCarthy written all over it. I think he would fit there well and kind of fit what that franchise is well. So I don't know if I'm looking at that one. The one that's interesting that keeps kind of getting thrown out a bit is the Jets. I feel like the Jets have interviewed everybody, including Maryland head coach Mike Locksley. So, I mean, that's another name you can throw into that conversation.
I'd be shocked though.
I know. But and so, now we talked about the Cowboys. That's the Deion to Dallas one is probably the biggest headline of all of them. We'll see where that goes. It's just a rumor right now. There's been no interview, just reports that there is at least some degree of interest there, which I guess makes sense, but I don't know. Jerry Jones is such a controlling owner. Deion Sanders is such a controlling coach. I don't see how any world in which that works out well for either party.
What I've learned about the NFL is like you can't really have your head coach be too much of an attention-seeking person. Mm-hmm. Harbaugh, for as much attention as he gets, the dude grinds. The guy knows how to win.
Oh yeah.
I mean, think how silly the Vikings look now. I mean, the Vikings had a good year, but the Vikings could have had him.
Oh yeah,
and he wanted to go to the Vikings, and they chose not. The guy they hired obviously has done a great job, but now San Diego is a contender. That's the thing about the jump from college, Robin. I think we've seen it fail 9 out of 10 times. Urban Meyer, Steve Spurrier, you go down the list. Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh are rare. Mm-hmm. And Pete Carroll was a pro guy first before he went to college, and he went back to the pros.
Yeah, so with Marcus Freeman, obviously the Bears are the team that have reportedly expressed some interest there. It seems risky to me. I mean, Marcus Freeman has obviously done a great job, but just keep in mind, even earlier this season, they were wondering if he was going to get fired after that Northern Illinois loss. So that's a risky proposition to take a guy that has done well at a traditional college football power with all the resources in the world to then suddenly do that with a fledgling NFL franchise that has got a lot of work to do. That seems like a pretty daunting task.
He just doesn't. I mean, the NFL just seems too corporate, and he doesn't strike me as that kind of guy. Like with a large family and just the way his style, being a young family man. And
he's got just such a good situation right now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably not a much better job in college football than what he's got going on at Notre Dame, especially now that they're winning.
Now, Ohio State, he's an Ohio State alum. If Ryan Day ever moved on, Ohio State's first phone call would be to Marcus Freeman. Now, why would Ryan Day move on? I don't know. But
might not be his choice.
No, he's going to win the national title. But he might just feel unappreciated and say, I'm going to the NFL. Ryan Day to the NFL is always one to watch.
It feels like Ohio State's been trying to fire Ryan Day for the last 4 years. So you never know. They could win the title and then he loses 2 games next year and they'll fire him.
Could he go to a pro job though?
Could. And that's one that we haven't mentioned yet. But I think that's a guy, if he is ever to move on from Ohio State, I think NFL would certainly come calling, and I think he would certainly be listening.
All right, when we come back, Abby Barmore will join the show. We'll take your questions in the mailbag. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Robin Washett, Abby Barmore. And Abby Barmore's missing Sipple, too. She usually sits right next to Sip and has to kind of get him in order. You didn't have to worry about Sip today, Abby.
Yeah, he keeps us on our toes, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah, always. Always handfuls of snacks and spilling. Yeah, the other day he spilled a full cranium energy drink during the show. And wanted to just continue and clean it up after the show. I'm like, no, I'm not going to let that just soak into my flooring for an hour. But anyway, we miss you, Sip. Abby, what do you got? Where are you starting off in the mailbag?
Our first one. Which incoming transfer do you think will make the largest impact on this team next year?
I mean, there's a lot you can go with. I think the receiver position, though, immediately, Dane Key is like an easy one for me on offense. And there's several, Robin, on defense that you could go with. I mean, Marquise Watson-Trent, though, with his production, you have to figure he's a guy that could have a chance to lead Nebraska in tackles next year.
Yeah, I mean, as far as resume and proven production on the field, he's right up there at the top. And then it's also a position that needed immediate help. So check for a guy that is probably going to make a big impact next season. And then offense, I agree with you with wide receiver. Like, I think that was a room that needed to be addressed first and foremost on that entire offense. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities there for impact players. And then given the fact that it's, the new position coach, handpicked guy, seems to bode well for immediate success next season. So I'll go with Key on offense.
Well, and I think McCullough, Deshaun McCullough is another big one that will plug in. I mean, and we're not even mentioning Williams-Nwaneri. I mean, but because he didn't have any production this year at Missouri, but he could explode. From a
ceiling standpoint, he could have the biggest impact out of all of them.
Yeah, this is, I mean, but they had to pay a lot of money to get this class. I think it's got a chance to be their best transfer class they've ever brought in, but it's also clearly their most expensive one in terms of the acquisitions they brought in. What do you got next?
Where does Ty Robinson rank amongst Nebraska's best interior D linemen since 2000?
Since 2000. Well, Sue, Crick, then
Davis brothers.
Yeah.
I mean, both NFL, good players.
Yep.
I think if you put him next to Sue, he'd
be as good as Crick.
He'd be just as good as Crick. I mean, but
Crick was pretty darn good.
Yeah. I mean,
so was Ty.
Robinson's length at 6'7". But yeah, I think he's in the top, got to be knocking on the door of the top 5. It's just, you get in the discussion of, teams that win versus teams that don't win. You have guys like Steve Warren that were really good, pro players. Lauren Kaiser, Ryan Bigham. I mean, there were some very good. Ryan Bigham played a long time in the NFL. I mean, there have definitely been some good D linemen, but Robinson, I think, knocks on the door of the top 5 of the last 25 years.
Yeah, I think he's firmly in the top 5. It's a matter of where how far up that top 5 he is, and I'm still putting Crick 2, but after that, like, it's not going to take much to sway me that Robinson couldn't be 3 on that list. So we're talking, what you said, since 2000. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I thought Ty was a dominant player. Like, he changed games in multiple ways, and the way that he ended his career, making impacts at all 3 levels. Special teams, defense, playing fullback, finishing the bowl game out as the lead blocker. That to me puts him above the rest of the group that you just named.
All right, Steve Warren would be discounted from the discussion because his final year is 99, but he was a 3rd round pick. You had Ryan Bingham, 7th round pick. You had Lakeven Smith, 6th round pick. Titus Adams, 7th round pick. Sue, obviously a 1st rounder. Malik Collins.
Ooh,
we're forgetting him.
Okay,
I'm putting Malik Collins ahead of Robinson.
Yes, but yes, okay.
What about Vincent Valentine? And then Khalil and Carlos. That's it. I think your top 5 before Robinson would consist in no order of the Davis twins, Malik Collins, Vincent Valentine, Sue, and Crick.
That's 6, right?
Or 6. I guess Sue drafted as a D tackle?
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at they don't list him as I'm on Wikipedia.
Yeah, so he was an inside guy.
I thought he was too, but for some reason, they list him as a DN on Wikipedia. But yeah, there's 6 guys, and it's a matter of
I'm putting them over the Davises. I'm going to put him 4. I'm putting him 4. Collins, I forgot about Collins. I don't know how I forgot about Malik Collins.
So probably awesome. Sue, Collins, Crick, Robinson.
Sue, Collins, Crick, Robinson. Yeah.
Probably in that order. Yeah. So he's in the last 25 years, we got him at number 4. So what do you got next?
That's a good list. Okay, next one. Is the Big Ten a stronger conference than the SEC?
I think the NFL draft this year will really tell the final numbers on that. Like, what will the draft pick differential be? And remember, Oklahoma and Texas are now part of that number, but as well as the new Pac-12 teams of the Big Ten. So how close will the draft picks be? What will the first round breakdown be? But I think the gap has never been closed as much as it has been over the last 2 years, especially with the rise of Michigan under Jim Harbaugh recently. And then obviously what Ohio State's done, and then some of these new teams.
Yeah, that's always been the real telling barometer for me. You know, the on-field success is what it is. It's hard to compare because they play different schedules and different number of conference games, and it's not the same sample size or data points. So with the NFL, you know, then you're kind of taking a third-party element and gauging who has the best talent. And usually the SEC has far and away had the most first and second round picks. And so I'm curious to see how much that gap is closed this year. Because again, sure, they had Oklahoma, Texas, but now you're getting all of Oregon and USC and those types of guys that are going to join the Big Ten's list. So I agree, Sean. I think that gap is going to be as slim as it's been in a long, long time. And it'll probably go a long way into pointing just how much the Big Ten has closed on the SEC, just in terms of overall player talent.
And if you look, I mean, this year's draft we watch closely because if the Big Ten has more, look out. I mean, the ultimate propaganda points we put out at that point. But if the SEC holds on to the draft total number over the Big Ten, you know, they can at least still hold on to that trophy. But you know, right now they've lost all the other ones this year, and the draft is the big one remaining. Let's see, Abby, we have time. What do you got? One more or one quick one?
We have more? 2 last questions.
Okay, 2 last. Let's do it.
Okay.
We'll go quick.
So who's going to win the national championship?
I've got Ohio State. I mean, look, they're 9.5 point favor, but they beat Texas with Jeremiah Smith being a non-factor.
Yeah.
Now Notre Dame does have a good secondary. I mean, the back end of that Irish defense, led by Omaha native Xavier Watts, is outstanding. So that will be a matchup to watch in this game moving forward. But it's hard not to pick Ohio State. I do think, you know, they're built to win this. You know, the only way I see them losing it is if Will Howard just struggles and can't make the big throws.
Which, you know,
happened against Nebraska.
Yep. He's been known to have just off days and make critical mistakes. And if he does that against this Notre Dame team that doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes, that could put Ohio State in a bit of a bind. But I think just in terms of game-changing talent, Ohio State has as much as any team in the country. They're playing their best football in a long, long time, which is saying something right now. And when it comes to just needing a dude to go make a play, Ohio State has a embarrassing amount of riches to choose from in that regard.
All right, what do you got? Final question.
Our more fun one. If you could watch only one TV series for the rest of your life, what would you choose?
Well, I'm going with The Wire because I can always watch it over and over again. And I believe it's 6 seasons. So you have like 60 some episodes to watch. So you're set. I mean, that's like 60 hours of TV right there to watch, if not more. But just the writing, the character development, the storylines, that is my favorite show. You know, Sopranos is up there right with it, but I think The Wire is just laid out beautifully how that show's was put together on HBO.
Probably go The Office, just because for one, it's long, or there's a good volume of seasons there, and they have a variety of different storylines, characters, so it wouldn't get as stale. So I don't know. I lean towards comedies in that regard, so I'll go Office. How about you?
But you were not a fan of the Office theme day.
No,
a Big Ten UCLA basketball.
Bad timing.
Keep The Office on my living room TV and not at my basketball games.
And this week on Thursday night, it's ladies' night, and they're going to have sangria available at PBA.
You can get a Fred air freshener.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
In a t-shirt with Fred's face on it, Abby. Yeah. I mean, get all your gals together and drink some sangria with Fred Hoiberg air fresheners.
And watch Ruggers.
Woo! What a night.
What's your show, crazy. Abby? What are you watching?
I would pick New Girl. I think, right? I also lean towards like the comedy thing. Like, I think it's hilarious. It's like 6 seasons, so it's a little bit longer. I love that show. It's my favorite.
I like the crime investigative. I don't know. Not The Office. The Wire. The Wire had a lot of storylines to it, though. I don't know if you guys have you watched it all, Robin?
No, I started it, and then my wife just could not get into it, and so
it starts out a little slow,
yeah,
but then it just blows up, and you're like, whoa, I got to watch. Got my wisdom teeth pulled a couple years ago, and I rewatched every one again while I was at home.
What was the other one? Game of Thrones is another good one too. That's just so heavy. Like, I don't know if I like. That's the only show I get to watch. Like, what that would do to my psyche, or just the most terrible possible things that could ever happen to somebody. Just that's all I watch.
You got to pick something light.
give me Steve Carell. I can handle that.
All right. When we come back, we'll close the show with some Nebraska basketball talk. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. Final segment of the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Robin Washett talking Nebraska basketball now to close things out. And again, if you're not a member of Husker Online, try us out. Get your first 7 days for $1. Great time to join. Try us out for a week just for $1 to learn more about what we offer and all the great content and transfer portal coverage, basketball coverage, spring practice will be around the corner. HuskerOnline.com, 7 days for $1. But let's get into the basketball discussion, Robin, because, I said this earlier in the week to Sipple. I feel like if they just would have won the Iowa game, you could live with what else has happened. You could live with Purdue. You could live with Michigan State. But that Iowa loss kind of turned a round of golf into a bogey round. You were kind of going to maybe be one under par at that point. And now you just kind of fear where this is all going because of how poorly this team has played, arguably in their two tougher road games of the season.
Yeah, so the Iowa game, when even just in the kind of bird's eye view of the schedule, was the one that you thought that they had the best chance to win. Like going to Purdue, like they have never won there as a program for a reason. It's one of the most difficult places to play in all of college basketball. And then when Purdue shoots the way that they shot, I don't care if you're Duke or Kentucky, very few teams in the country are going to go win there. So that game, as ugly as it was, you kind of just eat it and try to move on. But you pair that with the way that Iowa game went down, the fact that they blew a 15-point second half lead and had every opportunity to win it and didn't. Now you're looking at 2 straight losses for the first time this season, and you have some ground to make up a little bit, because this 5-game schedule to open January was going to be a really defining point, even before we got to it. And they did a good job of beating a UCLA team they were supposed to beat, and kind of got off to a hot start. But then they lost that momentum against UCLA, and now they're behind the sticks after an embarrassment out in West Lafayette. So now you got Rutgers at home, Maryland on the road, and then a surging USC team coming here next week on Wednesday, followed by a trip to Wisconsin, who is suddenly a top 25 team.
Whenever they won at Wisconsin last. Have you ever covered a win out there?
Yeah.
But they don't play well there traditionally.
Tim Miles won out there a few years ago.
And then that West Coast, been a while. that Northwest trip to Oregon, Washington.
Yeah, that's the beginning of February.
Washington's a winnable road game. Am I wrong saying that?
So it's funny you say that, because according to the Ken Palm analytics, that is the only road game Nebraska is favored in per Ken Palm, with a 61% chance to a victory. So that, that's one that they got to have. They have some other ones that are kind of coin flips, like Northwestern and Penn State. They give Nebraska a 45% chance at Northwestern, 41% chance at Penn State.
State's been struggling.
Yeah. So, there are games, attainable games, just like Iowa was an attainable game left on the schedule, but they got some things to figure out. Like this can't be like last year, where there's just such a dramatic split between the team that goes on the road and the team that shows up at PBA. And Juwan Gary and Bryce Williams and those guys have insisted that they're not going to let a repeat of last year happen. But the collapse at Iowa and the absolute dismantling at Purdue, it's hard not to think that, wow, now all of a sudden this team forgot to win on the road. I guess the thing you can point to is, well, they went and beat Creighton, and all of a sudden Creighton's playing some pretty good basketball right now. And that win kind of at least gives you some hope. And the fact that they went to Hawaii and won a true road game there. So they've have 2 true road wins. So technically they're 2-3 in true road wins, with one of those losses being an overtime game they should have won by every stretch. So they've got some stuff to figure out, but for me, it all starts with their defense. If they play defensively the way they did against Creighton, the way they did against Hawaii, they can compete with most any team on their schedule. But if they let teams do whatever they want, like they did for the second half in overtime against Iowa and the entire game against Purdue, they're not going to have a chance against anyone. So defensively, this team, in order for them to accomplish anything close to what they hope this season, it all starts on that end of the floor, and they have to pick it up defensively.
My question, Robin, is would a 10-10 record with no road wins get them to the Big Ten?
No Big Ten road wins.
No Big Ten. Yeah, I'm sorry, Big Ten. That's what I meant.
Yep.
10 Big Ten road wins or no Big Ten road wins. Will that get them in? Are they going to need to get at least kind of like last year? We had the same discussion. Then they won at Michigan. They won at Indiana.
Yep.
And then that got them the 3 seed. I mean, that's, they have this. I mean, I think all of their home games they can win.
Yes.
They're going to be hard, but I think, are they favored in all their home games?
Not Michigan.
What's the percentage of that win?
They have a 39% chance of victory against Michigan.
That's surprising.
Michigan's a tough matchup, man. They're just such a unique roster with their bigs. But again, I don't know how much that factors in just how different of a team Nebraska is at Pinnacle Bank Arena. But beyond that, Illinois, that's the other one. They gave Nebraska a 37% chance. So going undefeated at home in league is far from like a given.
How many of the home games would be quad 1 wins right now?
Let's see. Probably most of them. I'm looking at it.
What's quad 1 for a home win? Top 25?
Yeah. So USC, it's top 25. So not USC, not a good chunk of them. Let's just say that
would be quad 1 wins at home.
So Illinois would be quad 1. Michigan would be quad 1. Maryland would be quad 1. So 3.
Wow.
3 of the
they could get 3 quad 1s. I mean, I think if they can win out at home, they'll get it.
Yeah. And again, that's all subject to change by the day. It all depends. But to your point, no, I don't think they get in, because when you come to Selection Sunday, the committee is looking for reasons not to let you in. And if you have such a glaring omission on your resume as to 0 conference wins on the road, that's a no-brainer. And if it comes down to comparing resumes, this team did this but never won a league road game, that kind of makes you an easy target on the chopping block that might keep you out of the big dance.
All right. Well, plenty to follow. Robin will keep you posted all week and all throughout the weekend, as nobody covers Nebraska basketball better than Robin. And we'll be back later in the week as well on Headlines, as we'll talk more about the latest with Husker Hoops. For Abby Barmore, Robin Washett, I'm Sean Callahan signing off here for the Husker Online Show.